talk to you. I'm going to talk to you for a little while. I'm going to talk to you about this. Every moment matters in becoming great managers, which is sort of interesting. I'm going to start with a statement. And my statement is this, that I believe that every manager, regardless of where they work, or what they do, or what level they are, or what their skill level is, every manager has the potential to be even better at what they do than they currently are. That's my opening statement. Now, I have the pleasure, I guess, of working with all sorts of managers, right the way across a whole cross-section of industries. And these managers are generally the top-performing people. And I work with them in different ways. I deliver training and coaching. I mentor some of them. We work on collaborating in terms of ideas of how they become more effective at what they do. So what I want to do with my talk with you is share some of those ideas with you, so that if you choose, you can take them and run with it yourself, and maybe even build on your incredible levels of success so far. Sound like a good deal? Who's up for that? Say aye. Aye. Good, all right, that's a good start. So here we go. I'm going to start by dealing with this. This is the big misnomer. The big misnomer is, just because you can do the job well, doesn't mean you can manage other people doing that job. So what do I mean by this? I mean, you might be a great salesperson, but just because you are a great salesperson doesn't necessarily mean that you will become a great sales manager, because they are quite different skill sets. Let me give you an example. This guy, any idea? Shearer. Alan Shearer. Yeah, he was a good footballer. Now, when he was a footballer, in fact, by the time he retired as a footballer, he held the record for the highest scoring tally in the Premiership. He was, undoubtedly, whether you're with this team or not, a great footballer. Was great for England as well. He had all the skills that a footballer needed. And when he was playing, people looked like this. This is what the fans looked like. However, after he retired from football, and he had become a manager, and he stepped in to become manager for Newcastle United at the end of the season, and everybody hailed him because he was this wonderful, inspirational player. And they were in a little bit of a problem, and they thought, well, who's going to help us? It's got to be the man who will inspire our team. Well, 9 weeks later, the fans looked like this. Because he was a great player. The trouble is, just because he was a great player didn't mean that he could inspire his team at the time they needed it to get the best from them. They are two different skill sets. Now, on the other hand, this guy here, he was an okay player. He played professional football, and he played it very well, but he wasn't an Alan Shearer by any stretch of the imagination. But many years later, he went on to become this guy. And it didn't matter that he wasn't as good a player, because there is no doubting that in the history of the Premiership, he is the best manager there has been. And what was his skill? What was his secret? It's quite simple. He had the ability to inspire his team and get the best out of them. And no matter who was in that team. And you can't just say they threw money at the team, because that money had been thrown at the team at the time he left. And look at the money that's in the team out there. And yet they're struggling, and have done since he left, because different people have tried to come in and replicate what he did amazingly well. So when you speak to great managers in whatever industry, and you say, what is the #1 skill you bring to the table? They don't say doing the job, although that's up there, because of course it helps if you know the job. And they don't say I'm a great decision maker. It's this. It's people skills. It's their ability to connect with people and inspire them and motivate them and give them the desire to want to perform to their best, and give them a route where they can find their best. So that's what I'm going to do with you. I'm going to share these skills and these secrets that I've worked with some of the very best managers that are out there, that have taken them from being good to being better, in some cases being great. And you can see whether it's something that resonates with you. And maybe it will help us all just get better at what we do. And if we're better at what we do, it's got to be a good thing, because at the end, everybody benefits from that. So let's start with this. Loyalty. Loyalty. Actually, I was involved in a survey not long ago, and that survey was with top managers from across all these industries. And we were trying to ask them, what do you think the #1 asset is in terms of the people you work with? And pretty much across the board, they said loyalty. Because without the loyalty of your team, how can you possibly get them to go where you want? How can you inspire someone who has no loyalty for you as a manager? But here's the problem. Here's the rub. Loyalty is not something you can demand. You can't say to somebody, I expect your loyalty. Because you're going to say, okay, I'll think about that. Loyalty is something that is bestowed. So how do great managers get the people that work with them and for them to become loyal, to have this desire to be loyal? And that's what I'm going to share with you. So, first thing we're going to talk about is reciprocity. Who's heard that word? Just put your hand up. Yeah, it's not the popular word. So reciprocity, very simply, reciprocity means this. It means that you are more likely to do a good deed for someone that has already done one for you. It's as simple as that. But it's a social construct, and actually we live our lives by it. We judge people's behaviour by reciprocity. It's very powerful. Let me give you a real-world example of reciprocity. You're in a pub, and you're with your friends are buying drinks, and you're taking turns to buy rounds of drinks, and when it comes to you, it's your turn. If you're going to leave, you think, right, I've got to get my round in before I go. You've got to repay the deed. It's got to be done. But it's more powerful than that, because if you don't adhere to the law of reciprocity, then people start talking about you as if you've broken social convention. They say, John, have you noticed how he never sticks his hand in his pocket? How many of you have done that? Just put your hands up. How many of you have spoken and said, have you noticed how he then puts his hand in his pocket? He never buys a drink. He's a nice bloke, but quite frankly, he's a little bit... And that's something that we don't accept. It's like we've broken a rule. We haven't adhered to the law of reciprocity. So, very successful people are very good at employing reciprocity in their favour. So I'm going to tell you a story about my wife. Who's got a wife? Put your hands up. Is that why you look so miserable? All right. My wife makes me happy. She makes me very happy. But some years ago, she came up with this idea that she wanted a pair of pink Timberland boots. Pink Timberland boots. The only problem was that at the time, pink Timberland boots didn't exist. There were no such thing. We went along to a Timberland store. She said she wanted pink Timberlands. Sorry, they don't do them. But, as is the case with most women who've got an idea about something that they want, she insisted that we keep looking for them. And we did. So for the next 18 months, every time we walked past the Timberland store, we would go in, or rather she would send me in to ask, do you have any pink Timberlands? No. We would check on the web. No. And then one day, after 18 months, on this quest, we walked past the store, and there, in the window, on a pedestal, with a light shining down on them, were a pair of pink Timberland boots. Hallelujah. That's what happened. So in we went. We went inside and we were greeted by a young guy, pretty young guy, I reckon he was a student. And he said, can I help you? And we told him the story and he said, well, wonderful. He said, why don't you take a seat? He said, no, I'll go and get the boots. And so we did. We sat down, I sat down opposite my wife and she was all excited. And actually the tension in the air, you could sort of cut it with a knife because the anticipation of actually receiving these pink Timberland boots after an 18-month quest. And so there we go, and out he comes. And he had actually opened the box and stood them up and was holding them like this. Like it was the Queen's coronation. He walked towards us. You could hear the sound of angels' voices in the sky. And my wife, you could see tears rolling down her cheek as this goal had been realised. And there it was. And he sat down in front of her and he put the shoes in front and she slipped one of her shoes off and put her foot into the pink Timberland boot. And we did it up. And she put the other one in and tied that up and did that up. And she stood up. And she looked at them. And she said, I don't like them. I said, sorry, what do you mean you don't like them? They're pink. She said, no, they're pink. I don't like them. They don't feel very comfortable. I said, right, okay, look, here's the problem. You're used to wearing high-heeled shoes or trainers, but you're not used to wearing boots, and when you wear them, they're sort of uncomfortable the first time that you put them on. I said, why don't you ask this young guy? And this is where reciprocity came into play. And he said, because quite frankly, I'd handed him an open door to sell these boots to my wife. And he said, well, madam, your husband's absolutely right. People who are not used to wearing boots find them uncomfortable when they first put them on. He said, but it's also true to say that some people never get used to them at all. He said, why don't you do this? Inside I'm thinking, interesting. He said, why don't you do this? We have them now. We're making pink Timberlands. Why don't you go home and think about it? If you want them next week, they're still going to be here. Why don't you go and speak to other people who maybe had the same experience of you, and then perhaps it'll make you feel a little bit more comfortable about doing this. And I thought, that's good. That's good. I like what you've done. I'm impressed. You're not trying to get the sale, which will no doubt give you a bit of commission, and you're a student, so you're not earning much money, and that commission is worth a lot to you. Actually, instead of doing that, you're just thinking about the best service you can give to my wife, if you see what I mean. And so instead, he says, go away and think about it. And I like that. And I'm thinking, there's a reciprocity. I feel like I owe you something for this because you're looking out for her. And in my head, I'm thinking, I talk about reciprocity all the time. I know what's happening to me now, but I feel like I want to reward you. So I bought them. I bought the shoes because he did such a good job. And I bought the shoes, and my wife said, well, I'm really not sure. And I said, don't worry about it, you'll get used to them. And 6 months later, I sold them on eBay. Brilliant. But how does it work, reciprocity? Reciprocity in sales, as you can see, has a really massive impact. In fact, salespeople, I don't know how many sales managers are in here, but employing reciprocity in sales, it is incredibly powerful. It's often counterintuitive, but it's incredibly powerful. But in management, reciprocity is one of the skills that we use to develop loyalty. In other words, what can we give to our teams that will make them want to repay us? Because the best way they can repay us is with loyalty. So we can give to them support. We can support them in their development, in their career path. We can offer them training. We can be empathetic, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. We can use recognition. All of these skills create an environment where reciprocity flourishes. And because it flourishes, it means that suddenly you have in front of you a team that will go the extra mile for you, put an extra bit of effort into it, actually have and share your dreams.